So today let's talk a bit about multiband processing. Multiband processing essentially is when we split an audio signal into different frequencies and then we process each of those frequencies differently. And this is great for isolating effects to just one part of your dynamic range without it affecting the entire sound. That process is really easy in Ableton Live. We're just going to create an audio effect rack and drop that onto a track. And today we're going to be working with some loops from our dry drums collection. Now once that audio effect rack is loaded up, I'm just going to open the chain list and create a chain, and then use Command D to duplicate that chain twice. And now let's label these. I used Command R, and we'll call this highs, call this mids, and we'll call this lows. Okay. Now, in order to split this signal up, we'll use an EQ. And you can use any EQ really to achieve this effect. I'm going to use EQ3 in Ableton Live because it is easy to use out the gate, and it's also less CPU intensive than other equalizers. So if you're doing some real basic EQ stuff like a kill or a cut, consider EQ3, especially in live settings. Now, in order to isolate the frequencies, we're going to use these EQ kills, or these mutes. So for this to only give us the highs, we'll get rid of the lows and mids. For this to only give us the mids, we will remove the lows and the highs. And to get just the lows here, we'll get rid of the highs and the mids. Now, what this will allow us to do is divide this signal into 3 parts using the solo buttons. So let's just solo these drums. And now we can independently affect the highs, the mids, and the lows. Okay? So, in context, why would you use this? I think it varies with every song and every application, but there are a couple of utility things that I like to do with drums, as well as some creative effects that I like to use with drums that take advantage of audio effect racks. So let's start with those. The first thing that I like to do, especially when working with a live kit, is to kind of sit the lows a bit more. Live kick drums, they obviously vary in volume. There's a bit more of a room sound in it. So we can use some tools to give it more of that kind of transient feel of a recorded kick, but still have that live tone under it. So the first thing I'm going to do will be a little bit less audible, especially on headphones. But it's worth noting is dropping the utility tool on to the lows. The utility tool has this function called width, which allows you to set a signal to mono by going all the way down to 0, or to spread the signal to the side only content, widening it by going to 200. Since we're working with drum sounds, with kick drum sounds, I really want that transient punch to set center. You don't want your kick veering left or right. Same goes for the low tom sounds on this kit. So we're going to drop this down to mono to make sure that in the mix, in the mastering stages, we don't have any low frequency content wide unless we want it there. Okay, so let's just drop that down. Okay. And the other thing that I want to do is compress these lows independently of the mids and the highs, because I can use some gain makeup and a relaxed attack to kind of push the transients forward and give the low end some more beef to cut through the rest of the mix. Okay, so we'll raise the ratio to about, let's say 3:1. Come off the attack a bit. Just looking for an overall peak. There we go. Coming off that attack a bit helps a lot because we don't want to squash the initial transients. Let's raise the release, gets the pump a bit more. Tightened up that low end. And this is already a really well processed signal, so this is kind of just squeezing a little extra juice. So we've already achieved a little bit of extra tone. You should hear that within the context of the mix, because I think that's where it really shines. You see a lot more of the energy of the track come back. Now again, don't take these settings as concrete. Things are going to vary based on your application. The key thing to look out for is just a bit of gain reduction, and play with the attack until you feel like that thump comes back. You don't want a really fast attack, because that's going to engage the compressor right when the kick hits, and it'll mute that initial transient. So raise your attack a bit when working with something like this. Okay? Now, another tool that I like to use when working with multiband processing is saturation. And saturation is really useful, especially in modern applications, because a lot of our listeners are tuning in on headphones, on laptop speakers, on devices that have most of their emphasis in the mid-range. You hear a lot of clarity in the mid-range. And that leaves you room to add some harmonic distortion to make it seem like the sound is a lot louder, or the song is a lot louder. I think we put so much attention on low frequencies and high frequencies when we're mixing that we lose the potential of getting a lot more signal gain out of the mids and a lot more perceived volume out of the mids. So a saturator will add that harmonic content that we're looking for. Let's solo this again. Soloing the mids. And out of the bat, the first thing I want to do is change this to a medium curve. You'll hear a bit of a lift already. I'm going to add some drive, and I'm going to use the New York compression style of processing this, where you add a lot of the effect sound to get the tone, and then you dial things back with the dry wet. Okay, so this is a bit extreme, and now we'll dial it back with the dry wet. So you still get that tone of the saturation without it being so overbearing, because there's still some of the original dry signal. A/B that. This is without, with, in the context of the full beat. Hear all of that perceived energy that comes back. And another effect that I use, it's a bit utility. On the highs is an auto panner. And I use this effect very subtly, but it basically will create a bit of movement in only the top parts of the drum signal. You don't want this happening on your kick and your mids. Again, you don't want the kick and snare to be moving all over the spectrum. You really want this to only happen on the high frequency content, because there's a bit less energy in it, so it won't distract from the groove too much. So I'll use this very subtly. Let's solo this again. And I actually, it depends on the song, but I actually like using the random option a lot. And we'll lower that rate a bit. With headphones on, you can really hear this. And then in the full context of the song, it doesn't become overbearing, and that's why it really works. We still have that kick and the mids centering everything. And so for one last application, I'm a big fan of glitching tools, so let's go to one of my favorites. This is a tool from iZotope called Stutter Edit. Stutter Edit is a glitching tool that allows you to assign effects to a MIDI controller. So I've loaded that just to our mids, and I'm going to go to this empty MIDI channel and output to our dry drum channel and iZotope Stutter Edit. automatically selects. Now every time I send a MIDI note to this channel, it will tell Stutter Edit to engage and do some type of effect on just the mids. So an effect that is extreme over the entire bus might become a bit disruptive to the groove, but it sits really nice in just the mids and doesn't distract from the full song when you play it through. So let's give that a quick listen. So hopefully this gets you thinking about different applications of multi-band processing. Again, this is one of those things that you can use creatively, you can use it as a mixing tool, and you can really use it on any track or even your master bus. So for more tutorials like this, and for the finest loops ever repeated, be sure to visit thelooploft.com. Till next time, take care.